It's just so important now. Like just being trust will win you deals where you are the most expensive. You've created the most tension, like constructive tension, where you may have had like difficult words with your prospect, but they're like, I want you because you pushed me to make the best choice.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. This is the first of our masterclass series, the Soundcheck, where we'll be connecting with industry leaders to get the lowdown on all things sales, CS, marketing, so we can provide you with actionable tips to keep moving that needle forward. Delighted to be connected with Hannah today, who we've had the pleasure of connecting with on LinkedIn many times. We finally met at an event thanks to our friends at Lavender recently, which was awesome. But I don't like to do introductions on behalf of people, so I'm going to hand over to you and take it away.
Oh no, I appreciate it, Rory, so much. And I know we met in person before we did the Zoom thing, which is really rare. That doesn't happen very often. But I appreciate you having me on. So I'm Hannah Ajikawo. I'm the CEO and founder of a revenue consulting firm called Revenue Funnel. Very timely to have a conversation like this because I've been shouting and screaming about alignment across marketing, sales, and CS, and then you introduce it like that, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful symphony to my ears. So very similar story to a lot of people. I've only ever done sales. I had no plan to get into sales, and have held every role you can think of through junior rep. Didn't used to be called SDR. It was BDE, I think we were called, or something like that. Business development executive. My parents thought I was literally the CEO when I came home with that title, and then all the way up to chief revenue officer, which is a role I'm actually sitting in fractionally today. So I guess with regards to revenue funnel, some of the things that I'm trying to help organizations address is how they become closer aligned to the way in which buyers need to buy from them, and the way in which the buying cycles typically work today. And a big part of that is just helping them to acknowledge what's happening. What things and decisions do buyers need to make throughout their revenue journey, and how can we help facilitate and support them in that journey. And as you know, I like to scream and shout about sales online. So that's probably how you connected with me in the first place. Like, who's that person that keeps swearing in the in their LinkedIn status? But I absolutely love what I do. Outside of that, of course, I'm a mum to my big boy Gabe. He's 6, and I also advocate heavily to create much more representation of women of color in sales through my role at Sisters in Sales. So really busy, doing lots of stuff and having lots of fun. So yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Kudos to you. Lots of plates being spun at once.
Yes.
And I could say before I built Trumpet, I was following your journey as a sales rep and was always inspired by your content. So very grateful that you've been sharing all of your wisdom with the world. It's invaluable. And before we kick off today, got some icebreakers because we've got to make it fun.
Okay.
So very quick fire. The first, your favorite musician.
Oh gosh. I don't have favorites of anything.
No, you've ruined all icebreakers because they're all favorites.
Yeah, I'm just like, everything is all right. So let me. So what I'm really struggling with this because I don't actually have a favorite musician. I can tell you a musician that I fancy. Can I do that?
Yes, that's even better.
Chris Brown. Love Chris Brown.
Is
Absolutely.
it the dance moves or is it
It's just
the
a
kind of
combination of everything. It's the confidence. It's everything. So yeah, I was really disappointed I didn't get to see him when he came over to the UK, but that's another story.
cool? A little bit different from music. Your favorite app or platform?
Oh, okay. So I spend an abnormal amount of time in my Apple Notes. There's like $4 billion worth of business ideas there. So if someone hacks my iCloud, it's game over. I spend most of my time there, and then I'm big on podcasts, so I listen to podcasts every day. I don't really have favorites. I kind of jump between things based on like where my head's at when it comes to gaps in knowledge or what I'm interested in. But yeah, I'm big on like the motivational. Let's get ready. Let's start the day. Let's go. That's start my day like that with podcasts.
Nice. I feel you. I'm very pen and paper, and there's a million different note-taking apps in the world, and I'm the same Apple note-taking app. Just keep it simple.
Yeah, it just does the job.
Does the job. Cool. And from one podcast to another, is there any that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh, so one of the so I'm just going to try and remember. I'm going to try and remember name of it. I think it might be Millionaire Mindcast. That's actually one of the first ones I listened to, and it's actually about a guy who has made most of his money through real estate. But I just remember one thing he was doing for me at a point where I was like, oh my god, the world isn't really small, and there's like I'm in this zone of self actualization, and I'm going to grow and develop. I was like, oh, I should probably listen to some podcasts. So about 5 years ago, like my brain switched on. But he's used to interview people that came from nothing and created something, and for me that was really that's like my story, right, to some degree. So I really connected with the stories there, where it's like, oh my god, you can literally have zero and just create magic. You can just use your brain and start something, and I found that quite intriguing. And I used to what's the other one that I really love? So I love the Stephen Bartlett's one, of course. I think everybody listens to that now. Not all of them. Some of them I'm like, yeah, not really a topic for me. but there are a few that stand out, like the interview he did with, and I can't remember her name, but the CEO and founder of Dermalogica. Everybody tune into that. It's amazing. It's really amazing. So yeah, there's
Awesome.
that comes to mind.
Good stuff. Cool. So we're going to jump straight into things now. Thanks for going through the icebreakers. Hot topic today is engaging stakeholders. It is very difficult in the current market. More stakeholders than ever involved in decision-making processes. Average used to be around 6. It's now 7 to 11. That number increases as you move up the funnel. And we all know that if you're single-threaded, the chance of actually closing a deal is 5%. But 78% of reps are most often single-threaded.
Yeah.
So love to hear your thoughts on engaging stakeholders beyond your champion.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because some of it is that some of the reasons why a lot of reps will focus on one person in an organization is because we incentivize reps to a lot of the times to generate opportunities, right? And that opportunity usually starts with a meeting, so they've hit that KPI, and then maybe the kind of hard KPI is that opportunity. And when you're a junior rep, you kind of just hold on to that. Like that's the person who had the opportunity, and I'm just going to speak to them, and everything they say, I'm going to take as at face value. So I think there's a couple of things structurally in how we incentivize reps, which means it's quite difficult for them to think outside of who else should I be engaging with, and is it my role to do that, or is it the person I'm speaking to's role to do that? So that's kind of one thing. When it comes in general to like the whole story around how we start to engage decision makers, I think from the outset we should be thinking about the broadest picture of who's going to be involved in that, who's going to make up that decision making unit. And I think whilst there's a lot of we call it like decision makers, and there's all these people, but there's only one or two people that really make the decision. There's just a lot of people who have influence, and they have different responsibilities in that whole decision making cycle. And we have to really quickly start to map that out. So we have to start with making some assumptions in the beginning to say, okay, this is our value proposition as an organization. This is the problem that we're promising to solve. That's the value exchange, in exchange for money, hopefully at some point. And we think that it's going to benefit this individual. We feel like the person above them is going to be the person that signs on a dotted line, and we feel like their downline is going to be the ones that are impacted, the sort of users on the ground, right? So I need to make sure that I've got kind of that 360 view around all of the people that could in some way impact that, and then I'm going to try and create some connections. All of this before I even contact them, right? So we've got some great tools in like LinkedIn Sales now, where you can do all the relationship mapping. And trust me, it was better than when I was like a quota carrying rep, where it was just like a list of names. And that was it, right? So and emails used to work, by the way. But yeah, so we want to do a lot of preparation to try and get our own assumptions around who we think might be involved in that decision making process, and then begin our plan on how we're going to start to engage them. And I think that we might have loads of names and think multi-threaded, but we execute single-threadedly. We just have like lots of single threads of conversations floating about, and there's no connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once they're on the call, you're still speaking to that main person, that champion, and trying to get everyone else engaged on the call is super, super difficult. So it's one thing getting them on the call, but actually maintaining engagement throughout is another. And when you take this multi-threaded approach and you start doing some stakeholder mapping, how early on in the sales cycle do you do that? Because you've always got to build the relationship. And does that start from the discovery call, or do you start to introduce that later on?
In the beginning, I'm always going to look at a big selection of contacts. I always encourage teams, hey, like map out who we think is going to be. I love the concept of above the line and below the line. It's nicely been encapsulated in books now. But before I used to be like, who makes decisions and who's impacted by them. That's kind of similar thread. But you want to do that early on. But what we then do is we just kind of like we just poke a little bit, right? You're like, let me just send a message, a connection request, see who responds, because we effectively want to see who's active, who's going to be the first person that actually gives me something. And then from there, I want to start to say, like, these are some of the assumptions I'm making about who could be involved in thinking through this, exploring it, testing it, evaluating it, whatever that the language is based on how you operate your sales motion. And then from there, we kind of can help to validate or invalidate if those people would be part of it or not. But that planning and that kind of like outlining the mapping is from day one, definitely from day one.
I think it's fair to say that we all get happy ears in sales when your champion gets excited by the product. It's the assumption that they're going to be the one to carry this through from that point all the way through to the very, very end, do all the heavy lifting for you. So how do you, I guess, go about educating them on the journey ahead? Because there's this concept, and we see it a lot, where champions aren't necessarily champions. They often turn into messengers. So they've got their day job and they're busy doing a lot of back and forth for you to help this deal go forward. And obviously it's for them as well, because you're solving a problem specifically for them. How do you go about alleviating that pressure and coaching them on what can be pretty messy, lengthy, complex, high risk journey?
Yeah, and it's not leaning on them to say, okay, so what do you need to happen next? It's helping them understand what is going to happen next. And I think, as we know, buyers spend most of their time learning without us. We're just not in the room. We get a really small proportion of time with them. I think the stats around 17%, give or take, based on Gartner's research. But essentially, that 17% translates down into about 5% because they're looking at 4 or 5 vendors, and that's just I think the 4 is like the safe amount of vendors to look at any given time, right? So knowing that, we want to help to educate the champion that we're initially speaking with to say, this is what is coming up, these are the kind of things that you need to be considering, and these are the types of people that would typically step in to help validate that, to help say yes or no to that, to help direct it. It's not something that you're going to have to do on your own, thank the Lord type thing, right? So we want them to appreciate that you have enough experience doing this with other companies that you are highly likely to be right in making some assumptions around that. Now, we do want to test a little bit of those assumptions with the champion to say, this is what usually happens. How have you seen that unfold in your organization? Because they may say, oh, when we first bought this solution, because not everything's new, sometimes it's a replacement. When the last time we bought something like this, actually, it was this individual that did that. But I think that other person may want to kind of hear about this as well. But I think it's really key to help champions to establish the role that they're going to play, and you co-create and support them in the role that they need to do. I think a lot of people you'll be on a call, you might remember from your rep days where you're speaking to a champion and they're like, oh, I'm not your decision maker. Like they'll say, I'm not your decision maker, I'm just here to kind of gather the facts and stuff. But it's like, okay, well, let me tell you the facts that your boss is going to care about. It's going to be these 4 or 5 things, and then from there say, what have they asked you to gather, like what is it? Because if you go back, I can send you 5 brochures, I guarantee they don't want that. What is the answers that they need to the questions they have, and what are those questions? So we see these types of questions, is that what they asked you? And what that does is it actually gets them to think, oh man, I don't know, I don't think I had all that detail. They just said this, you sent a cold email and they said go join this call, I have no brief. So now we want them to go back and be a superhero. Oh, I had this demo in here. Watch the 1 hour recording, which nobody has ever watched in their life, right? So it's like, here's the summary, and AI is great for that now, right? Summarizing all of our calls. But we really need to work out, like, how much do they know? What's being asked of them? We just have to coach them. We really do.
And what happens if they become a bit of a blocker? Because we've all seen it before, where someone gets asked to look into a new solution, new provider, and they've been told exclusively, don't involve us yet. So you're going to do all of the validation, the exploration and research. And if they're not letting you go past them, how do you effectively bring in the other stakeholders?
Mm-hmm. And this is the thing. Sometimes you don't. I've closed six-figure deals with that, literally leveraging the champion, right? But we developed such a level of trust that I was what it went from that kind of adversarial, because you know how it is. Right? The moment you step into a sales engagement, the person's like, "I don't even like you, but I think I might need you," and then it's like, I kind of like you, and I think I definitely need you. No, it's like, okay, I really trust you. Just help me out, Hannah, right? So you want to get to that stage where it's kind of like they say, hey, I promise you I'm responsible, but I do need to go back. And they're like sharing their screen and showing you the emails. Like that's coming from the team. Like you want that level of kind of relationship. If you're not getting that relationship and you're not getting access, I'd think about the quality of that opportunity, full stop. Because if they're like, no, 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 just got some questions, I'm not giving you anything, I'm just collecting information, give them the information, and it's nothing to do with forecasting. I think sometimes we get so obsessed, like, I need access. And it's like, maybe it genuinely is just them doing research. And that's why I talk so much about discovery and breaking it down into research and review and really understanding, are you like, hey, are you at, where are you in understanding this internally? And they may say, oh, first call, you, the timing was perfect, you literally came to talk to me about digital sales rooms at this time, and we were just exploring it. Brilliant. Okay, so tell me a bit more about what it is that caught your attention. What's happening in the organization that makes you think that this could be, well, we're going through this and we've loads of opportunities now, and we're finding people are dropping out the pipeline, and we don't know what the comms have been like and stuff. Okay, so who else is part of this whole exploration? Just me for now. Boom, research. There's no way that these guys are in a position where they have actually built consensus internally that says, hey Rory, just letting you know that yeah, we're ready to really explore this solution. I've spoken with these teams. My boss, you know, Anna's looking after that, Susan's looking after that, James is looking after that, but I'm going to be the person you speak with. Now, this is an opportunity that has meat, but we get so obsessed with trying to sell to people who are at the research stage that's what happens. Oh, I can't send you pricing unless I speak to your boss. Oh, F off. I'm not saying to my boss. I don't trust you, dude. No way. But we think because we've been trained, if you don't have all those decision makers, it's not a deal. Correct, because it's not a deal yet. I'm literally here information gathering, and we have to find ways to accept that and just manage those interactions, because you will piss off a decision maker if you do go over someone's head when they have literally said we're just researching. Don't do that.
Absolutely. We had a great time the other day. Is it a project or is it a conversation?
Yeah, there you
And
go.
if it's the former, there's something there. Now you can put it in your CRM and move it forward. So,
Love
and
that.
also just to summarize that, it sounds like if you're single threaded and they're in the research phase, it's not an opportunity. Despite all the happy is, despite how exciting and cool they think the tool is, it's not an opportunity in your perspective.
If there's no evidence that they've built internal consensus, like you can speak to someone, but if you're asking them questions that are really trying to get into the kind of the meat of what this means to their organization. We're talking impact, we're talking about cost of taking action, cost of not taking action, you know, impact of not doing anything, like what your future all those standard questions, right? If they can't really answer them and they're like, oh, you know what, I'm just really at this stage of trying to figure out, like, what, I don't understand what it is, it sounds interesting, but I'm just trying to figure out what it is, then we can just help educate them. All right, so this is what people typically do. Typically, in a deal, you have all these different systems, and you'll be sending emails back and forward, and you'll be sending, and things get lost. And what happens there is that you actually become disconnected from the engagement. As you know, buyers, you know, turnover of decision makers is every 18 to 24 months. Like, you tell them the story, then they're like, holy crap, wow, that's quite significant. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. And now they're a bit more in tune, and they'll say, hey, let me tell you something. You get that kind of like change in tonality, and they soften up and they're disarmed, and now they start sharing a bit more. But we had to give them something that helps show them, like, what's the art of the possible. So it's not that if you're single threaded and they're in those early stages because it's a conversation, there's no deal. It just means we have to get them through that stage. We have to collaborate with them to say, listen, the only way your boss is going to look at this, or the only way your business, because they may be the decision maker, they're still just the champion. The only way your business is going to even consider this is if you do these three things. Right. So I'm going to do this one thing. You do those three things. Let's connect on Tuesday next week. And we're just going to talk about what you found. Now we're going to get some more meat. Now you start to see this project surface because it was so compelling. But we have to do that legwork. But what we often do is we don't. And we're like, you know what, we'd really be wanting to speak to, senior leader right now, and then we can get into the cost and stuff. And they're like, cool, I'll just go to the other person. Cheers. Like, it's so competitive now, Robbie. You know that, right? So you can't. We have to hold on to those opportunities and teach and support people, but we often don't. So it's not that it's not an opportunity. There's just more work to be done.
Absolutely. And do you feel reps need to be more direct with questions? Like I feel that there's a real softness, and we treat every call and conversation, like a precious piece of china. Like we
Yeah.
don't want to disturb it. We don't want to lose it from potentially becoming an opportunity. So we do everything we can to be really nice to them and not scare them away. Do you feel that we just need to, whilst building relationship, be more direct?
100%. And I think that's probably what I that was probably my differentiator really early on, because I was I said this recently, but I'm like, I was really bad at trying to build rapport with people in the beginning, because I was just like, man, I had so many, like, with my own personal challenges around, like, am I accepted? I was coming out and trying to identify and really working out, who am I as an individual? Who's Hannah, right? So I was going through all of that while trying to be a salesperson, right? So they say show up as your authentic self. I was like, I don't know who that is. So all I used to do is get really curious. I was just really intrigued by, like, how does this all work? How does this person in this role, what are they doing? So I would ask very direct questions like, why would you do that? Like, I don't how does that happen? How did your team spend that much time doing that? How did that come about? How would you even achieve that if you don't have this? I don't get. So I was genuinely like, I don't get it. So being asking those direct questions made them think, I don't get it neither. What have we been doing? Like, thanks for coming in, kind of thing, right? But the other thing is doing enough prep where you come into a discussion and you do say, well, if I reached out to Mark, would he know what this whole thing is about? Because I was just checking some stuff out, and I saw a couple of people in the team, and they'll be like, "Oh no, Mark's the other side of the business. Who you need to speak to is James." And James, then it's like they can tell that you've done some stuff and you've done some work, and that's the beauty of being able to earn the right to ask those questions. But if you just go in and say, "Tell me what's keeping you up at night," and they're like, "Shoot me now," it's like the worst question ever.
The
And I said,
checklist.
it's the checklist, yeah. What's keeping you up at night? Nothing. Okay then. Life is really good.
I love that. You can see I've got pen in hand. I'm taking so many notes here because this is invaluable. But that genuine curiosity really, really resonates. And that's what real discovery is about. You've done your research. You're genuinely
Yeah.
curious how you're going to help them. And I think that's how you also go beyond the stakeholder, is understanding the pain for the person in front of you,
Mhm.
but beyond them, understanding the jobs to be done with their manager, their CRO, the business. And you've got to have done some of that research as well. You've got to understand what they do, where they're at as a business, if they're growing, if they're in new markets and things like that.
Yes.
So it sounds like kind of having like leading questions that show you've done your research will help you create trust, but also help you understand how you're going to get into the other stakeholders that are involved.
Yeah. I wanted to double tap on that trust piece, because it's just so important now. Like, just being trust will win you deals where you are the most expensive. You've created the most tension, like constructive tension, where you may have had like difficult words with your prospect, but they're like, I want you because you pushed me to make the best choice. But trust today is really different, because we're not always in front of people. And we also know that people, when they're reaching out to us, they're sending 10 emails out to vendors at the same time, because even though we create these unique value propositions, they will tell you which bucket you fall into. They will tell you who you're. We're not really like that company. They're like, yeah, you are, bro. In our procurement system, you have the same tag, right? So you have to think about trust in two different ways. One is that internal trust where you're in the room. Sorry, wrong terminology. I'd say trust when you're in the room and trust when you're not in the room, because trust when you're in a room is you showing up with authority very quickly to make that person feel like, oh, this is going to be a good use of my time. And I always work with reps to say, you have to do something in that first 5 minutes that's not just about the weather, but that in your demeanor, in how you carry yourself, in how you talk about things, in what you've been doing, and how you introduce yourself, that makes someone think, oh, okay, this is good. I didn't think we'd get here already. But you have the power to influence that. However, when you're not in the room, which is most of the time, which is with the 80% of the decision making unit, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to come off this call. You're going to forward copy them on CC because Rory said copy in my team. I won't be the person, but you got my green flag, and that cool. And you might say as a leader, I'm saying I like it, but doesn't mean my team will, right? So, and we already kind of get excited, but we're like, okay. But what happens is you're not in a room, and now the only way that they're going to learn about you is without you. So they're going to go on LinkedIn and they're going to go on Google and they're going to be like, okay, so this person hasn't posted in 7 months. What are they? Which job? And their job thing is they've got 4 roles that are present, and I don't know where they work. They haven't commented. Like, I need to get to know you, because if you are the rep that's messaged me, I'm going to struggle to trust you are who you say you are, particularly when there's all these bot profiles and everything online, right? I need to know that you care about the thing that you're so desperately trying to get me to buy, right? This value proposition that you want me to buy into. If I don't see you even care about it, why should I? And I always go back to days where honestly, I would literally be in a room with a really big company, and their sales leaders and their other commercial leaders and their sales team, and the sales leader will be like, "One second, Hannah, I can feel how passionate you are about this." Like, they literally stop me and be like, "You really care?" I'm like, "Yeah, because now that I know how you work and I'm here with you, this is going to be so significant for you because it's going to do X, Y, and Z." But I could reel it off because I knew what I was doing and I was passionate about the solution. But that's the power in the room. But outside of the room, people need to know that who are you online? What's that digital footprint you've left? And how are you then going to enable your champion to kind of to evangelize you and your value proposition on your behalf? And that's going to be the other part of trust. What you're saying, if you're not excited as the champion going back, they'll be like, well, who's this joker? I don't know why you're wasting your time with him, right? So we really have to think about being in the room and not in the room.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to phrase it. The kind of concept of a trusted advisor just goes beyond the call. You can know your product inside out, but you've got to know the industry, the space, their problem, what they do, and how the two fit. Yeah, I really like the way you phrase that.
It's funny as well. A lot of junior reps are like, "Yeah, but Hannah, I've just left school and I've only got like 3 months experience." I'm like, "But did you just get born? You've had 22 years of life. What can you bring to the table?" And then they start getting into, "Oh, I used to manage a 40-person team at the local bar." I'm like, "There you go, use that, right?" Because they just need to know that. Can I trust you to do? If I tell you to go speak to my boss, are you going to embarrass me? That's literally all they're thinking about. When I hear people say, "Oh, Hannah, can you refer me to someone in your organization?" When I worked at other big companies, I'm like, hell to the no way. How you came at me, there's no way I'm allowing that. So we need to make sure that we're building that trust in various different ways, and knowing how we leverage our own stories to build that trust as well, when there's not that like lots of domain expertise.
Definitely. And once you've gained that trust, I feel like we could talk about this all day. So I'm gonna wrap up here for you. But the one question I wanted to ask was: once you've built that trust and you're starting to get in front of the other decision makers, the rise of the business case is kind of more like it's everywhere because of the current climate. Like every CRO, CFO, CEO is involved in every budget sign off, whether it's 5K or 100K. Whether it's an SMB deal or an enterprise deal, we're finding that the champion is often having to put together a business case. Do you see reps like proactively creating them? Would you recommend it? And also, how do you go about creating a business case when there's different levels of seniority involved?
So, firstly, the whole business, not the rep, needs to own the structure of a business case and a proposal. That should be a template that where you know that your rep's going to make sure that they're covering the typical parts of that, right? At a high level, we need to make sure that there's some kind of summary, 2 sentences, juicy, quite like impactful, right? So throw it in Chat GPT, say, "Hey, try again, make this sexier. Try again, make this sexier. It's for the CEO, make it sex until you're like, that sounds a bit like me." And then take out the esteemed colleague, which it just adds to everything when you throw it to my esteemed colleague. So we want to make sure that you've just got something that really captures the story. And the key thing for you in building a business case is when you're speaking to your champion and they're like, "Yeah, we just want to make it go faster." Say, "Champion, I get it and it's great for you, but I promise you there's a bigger story at your organization." So what I always talk about critical priorities. I make sure all of my teams go in and make sure that they can figure out what is a critical priority for a company. And we're gonna help that champion connect the dots if they don't, if it's not really front of mind, because maybe they're an inexperienced buyer, or maybe just maybe they're quite new in their role themselves and they're not that commercially astute. So we may say, "Hey, these are the themes, right, that we're seeing industry wise and in your kind of space. When I was doing some research, I can see that you guys did this, and this, which usually makes me think that your business is really, really heavily focused on international expansion. So now that we're back here, think about how we're going to tie it to that. How are you going to help? How is this going to help them with that expansion, right? This data or whatever it is. So we want to make sure that when the executives look at it, it's straight away. It's like it's completely in the language of the main thing that they have in their 2, 3, 5 year plan. It's so critical to have that, because when you leave, or if there's a layoff or whatever it is, we still hold on to the long term vision. That business case is still valid at the top, at least, right? And then we want to get into the detail, of course, of what we're actually going to do, what you came to us with, why now, the people involved, what you've achieved so far, and talk about why taking action now is going to create the impact that cannot be sustained if you don't make change, right? So we want to make sure that we've helped them in that business case talk about why now is going to be the best time to do it. Or actually, it may not be right now. It may actually be in Q1. If you have to set up an opportunity for Q1, go do that. It's okay. And then build up to it. People are like, we have to do it now. But I'm like, I don't mind starting a year, like 25% into my target. So the business case and trying to get into that other decision makers, it has to talk to the needs of those other people. The best way to do it without speaking to them is going right to the top, the main business objective. What's the main thing? What's that main crux that they're going after? And how does that tie into it? Because now you're going to get other decision makers falling in line and saying, okay, this is my like nuanced version of that. Because we're just not talking to them, and we're not getting the access that we need to. But if we show a compelling business case that looks good and talks proper business language, then people will be like, oh, this is pretty good. I can see that you guys have really done the work there. So that's going to be that's key for me. That goes without saying, and you're so right. No matter what the deal value is now, I've just come off of a call earlier today around that.
I made a bunch of notes, and there's a business case that I wrote today that I think I need to go back to and
back,
and touch up. Amazing. Hannah, we could talk about this all day long. So many awesome takeaways for every listener. I'm super grateful to have you on the show. I'm sure the first of many collaborations, as we've said together. And I'm going to wrap it up there because you need to go and enjoy your evening. But I do want to finish up with one question, which is, we like to finish the show hearing about a blunder. So one mistake that you've made in sales that you've learned from.
Oh, okay. There's loads. There's loads. Okay, so what I'd say one that burnt me a lot, right? So I've actually got this. I think there's a post on my LinkedIn. It was a long time ago. So I had my target at the time was about 450K. This is years ago, and I had two deals that was gonna do 50% of that, and one was kind of on the finish line, and the other one I had the yes from like the top, like the CRO board member person, all of the directors, and they were like, we can't wait, Hannah, really great, good to go. So I left it with my boss, went on holiday, like living life on my luxury trip to Dubai, loving it, right? Got back and he was like, oh gosh, Hannah, I got, there was no like, he was like, I got some bad news. There was no like access to emails when you were on holiday 10 years ago, right? He was like, I got some bad news. I said, what do you mean? We're just waiting for contracts to be signed. And he was like, it's just, it didn't close. And I was like, which one? He was like, both of them. And I was like, what do you mean? What did I do? What happened with what? So one of them did close the month after, but the other one, these are like chunky deals. Our average contract value was 6K. My deal was 100K. Like it just doesn't happen, right? That's just typical Hannah. Now, what happened was, and it's just something that I learned, and I always tell people, it was just that everybody was signed on board, great budget, fine, no problem, no brainer for them, great ROI. But there was somebody else in the organization trying to solve the same problem, right? And they got wind of it when it was going through like sign off and said, "Who are these guys?" Because our brand wasn't as popular. He said, "I'm doing something, and it's like literally 70% cheaper." And I was explaining there's a reason why it's 70% cheaper and and it was just like the price was so significant, but because I hadn't addressed all of those objections up front, it was just now you're on your back foot. Oh, please, right? So it was just that one question: who else in the organization could be passionate enough or exploratory enough to go and try and figure this out themselves? And there might be. You want to force your champion to go do that. Go find out who else is trying and solve this, because they had a relationship with the other company as well, and it was just it was dead. I tried to revive it for a year, dead.
Ouch. An expensive mistake, but I'm sure it sounds like an invaluable one.
It was, and now that question is it's probably on a checklist I've got somewhere that just ask this question.
Yeah, never make it again.
Exactly.
Awesome. Hannah, thank you again. It was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed diving into this as well. And we'll wrap it up there.
All right, it was fun. Thank you.